Nice buns, soft, fluffy, and ultra-low net carbs. Discover Hero Bread, the delicious, ultra-low net carb bread with incredible taste and texture. Hero Bread has 0 grams of sugar and is under 100 calories per serving. Plus, high in fiber with 5 to 10 grams of protein per serving. Available on Amazon.com, Walmart.com, and at hero.co. That's HERO.co. Delicious, ultra-low net carb Hero Bread, buns and tortillas. Soft and fluffy, high in fiber, and with 0 grams of sugar, up to 10 grams of protein, coming in at under 100 calories. Order today at hero.co and use the code AH10 to get 10% off your first purchase. That's AH10 at hero.co. HERO.co. Order from hero.co now and get 10% off your first purchase with promo code AH10. That's 10% off with code AH10. HERO.co.
This is
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've not talked to our dear friend in a while. We've all been so busy and quarantining, and battling the pandemic and Trump-demic and the police-demic, among other things. But we're glad to have him back, and as always, he is prolific when it comes to writing about political issues, especially prolific at thedailybeast.com. What a week it has already been, the impeachment vote. Also very interesting piece he wrote about Joe Biden and us not being able to move on. And I had a thought about that this morning. I definitely want to talk to him about that. But we're so glad to have back with us our dear friend, Michael Tomasky of the Daily Beast. Michael, first of all, how was the holiday season, even though I know it wasn't as usual, but how did you and your family make out over the holidays, man?
Well, thank you. I mean, we did fine. No big family gatherings, just 3 of us here. Yeah. But as I say, I'm very fortunate. I can do this work from home, and nobody's gotten sick, and so everything was okay on a personal level. Watching the world and the country was another matter.
Yeah. You wrote about, you described the impeachment hearings as a freak show.
Yeah, well,
weren't they?
They're saying, a lot of commentators are saying, it's the most bipartisan impeachment in history. 10 Republicans voted to impeach Trump, and that's true, and that's good, and I applaud those 10. Whatever else I might think about them on other days, on other matters, I applaud them for doing this. And that's great, but that still leaves 197 Republicans who voted to defend Trump and who gave some of the craziest speeches that I sat there and listened to all afternoon that you'll ever hear, and some of the most flagrantly ridiculous in terms of the way they tried to ignore the issue or sidestep the issue, and also in the ways they tried to exculpate Trump. And there were a few of them who tried to say that but he used the word peaceful in his speech, and yes, he did. He one time used the word peaceful in his address to that rally, but he used the word fight. Somebody told me something like 30 or 35 times, and the message was very clear. We're not gonna take this back through weakness. We can't be weak. All that kind of thing. There's no question what the message was. So just listening to these people try and apologize for that or make excuses for that, and then listening to them try to whine about how Bob De Niro said something mean about Trump and all that kind of stuff, it's just it's ridiculous. But it's much worse than ridiculous, because they're a threat to democracy.
You see him, though, trying to double back and cover himself and revise the history. He said, I sent in the National Guard. No, you didn't. He couldn't be found. There's also the evidence that he and Giuliani were making phone calls throughout the ordeal at the Capitol. So, I mean, I don't think you and I could walk down the street and pick someone who would say, profile someone and say, oh, this person looks like they probably would incite an insurrection. That's just, and it's kind of an arcane terminology in 2020. Who incites an insurrection? But who does but Donald Trump? And it's just irrefutable that that's what he's done. I guess the question now is whether any Republicans in the Senate do you think will have the courage to do what a few of those in the House did once the Senate trial commences?
I think a few will. It'll depend a little bit on the trial, and I think the trial is something that the Democrats are going to have to keep pretty short. This concern about stepping on Biden's agenda, I think, is a real one. So, if it were up to me, there would be something like in the mornings the Senate goes about the business of confirming Biden's nominees and working on the COVID relief bill and doing infrastructure and whatever else is on the positive agenda. Then they break, and then in the afternoon they do impeachment hearings, and they do it for a pretty limited time period, 2 or maybe 3 weeks at most. It is a trial, and as repulsive as Donald Trump is, he is the accused, and it's the United States, and he gets to present his side of the case. So they have to make sure that that gets done in a way that comports with American values. But they also can do it fast. And I think if they, depending on how it goes, I think a small handful, not 17 or 18, but 4 or 5 Republicans might actually go on record as vote to convict.
And you mentioned Joe, so I'm a little worried about Joe. And I get, the whole kumbaya thing, let's heal, let's build back. I get all of that. But I agree with you. He should just stay out of the way. Let the Senate do its job. He can say that. Look, I don't have an opinion on that. This is the Senate's job. This is what they need to do. I think it's wise for him not to have an opinion, but I hope he doesn't go out on his crusade. Oh, please stop. Let's not do this. Let's just move on. I think it's very dangerous and would be very dangerous to ignore this and just let it slide. Don't you?
Yeah, I do. I agree exactly with you, and I feel fairly confident that I think Biden's going to take that position. I don't think he's going to say that the Senate should not do this or the Senate should drop this. He's got too much respect for the Senate, where he spent 36 years, and he's surrounded by people who are knowledgeable and know how this works. I think as long as Biden himself is mostly talking about the future, the pandemic, the vaccine, the economy, and how we get this country back on track, he can let the Senate do what they want. And of course, on Fox News and all those other networks, they're going to say, oh, the Democrats are being divisive, they're looking backward, they're doing this, they're doing that. But, that's going to play to their base, but I don't think it's going to play outside their base. I think, I've seen polls, they're tentative, but, a narrow but real majority of people, wanted to see Trump impeached again, and wanted, actually one poll I saw, a narrow majority wanted to see him removed from office before the 20th, which isn't going to happen, but I assume that majority will support a Senate trial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they would. And I know you've also written about the importance of investigating Trump and humiliating him, which I don't mind either, because he's humiliated all of us. He's humiliated, everyone in the country. But just share with our audience, if you would, Michael, in your own words, why it is so important that there be a full investigation and all that this is brought to account. In this age of disinformation, we need some real documentation and information, don't we?
Yeah, well, this was an act of insurrection, an act of sedition, maybe an act of treason, depending on how you define treason. And it looks like its tentacles were very far-reaching. You had a lot of state Republican elected officials there. There were probably other Republican appointed officials, county and state executives and things like that, whose names we don't know, who might have been involved in this. Somebody coordinated this. There are questions about those tours that certain members were giving those groups in the days before. We saw that video come out yesterday. I'm sure you saw it, of a woman yelling at her Confederates through the window about describing to them the floor plan of the Capitol building and where they needed to go next. And those tweets from Lauren Boebert about Pelosi's location. What was the involvement of these people? What did they know beforehand? What was the involvement of white supremacist groups? Did they work with white supremacist groups? Did Republicans work with white supremacist and other radical right-wing groups? And did any of these people work with maybe not Trump himself, but the Trump family or anybody in the Trump White House? These are all, I don't know the answers to these questions right now. Nobody does, but these are all live, important questions that have to be addressed and have to be investigated. So to me, the Senate trial of Trump is important, but what's far more important is that Congress establish a joint panel, not of the House or the Senate, a joint panel where Schumer and Pelosi bring together their best people, their best questioners, their best investigators, give it the budget it needs, and really get to the bottom of this. And string this out don't string it out just for the purpose of stringing it out like the Republicans did with Benghazi, but take the time it's needed to get to the bottom of this. And I have a feeling some of the answers are going to be kind of shocking.
But this was really, you and I have been talking about this for the past 4 years. This wasn't a surprise to you, what they did on Wednesday.
No, I mean, they were broadcasting it for weeks before. I think Trump's going to be wild tweet was early December 6th or something like that. So it was known, which raises a whole other set of questions about people I didn't mention yet, but the police and what elements within what police forces were maybe in on this. But no, this wasn't It wasn't surprising in the near term because they were talking about December 6th. But in more general terms, Mark, the fact that something like this happened wasn't surprising in the least because we know what this element is and what Trump and social media have done to their minds and how they feel that their rights have been trampled when their side just lost a free and fair election.
And we also are hearing, there's reason for legitimate concern leading up to the inauguration. There are more troops. It's become a cliche, so many correspondents have said it. There are more troops on the streets of Washington, D.C. than there are in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places around the world. Yeah. And they've said they're coming back. They're going to try to do something on Inauguration Day. And where did they get that from? This is from the enabling of Donald Trump. Donald Trump enabling them, and them in turn enabling him. It's really a codependency situation. A mob and Donald Trump thinking that they both have something to fight for and believe in. I'm worried about the inauguration. If I were Joe Biden, you may be old enough to remember. I know I am. When Reagan's second inaugural was scheduled, and a big blizzard hit D.C. You remember that? And they just canceled the whole thing. They went inside a room in the Capitol. It was the second term anyway. What's the big deal? Raised up his hand, got the hell on out of there. I almost feel like maybe that's what Biden needs to consider to eliminate, any agenda that these crazies might have.
It's funny. I took advantage of that day, that cancellation, because I lived in Washington at the time, and my car was parked somewhere near Capitol Hill, buried in snow. And I took advantage of the fact that that whole thing was canceled to go up there with a shovel and try to dig my car out because I knew the streets would be quiet. But I have to say, if I were Biden, I'd just do it quietly in Blair House or something like that. That's the house across from the White House where the president-elect, by tradition, spends the night before the inauguration. But I can see needing, for the sake of continuity and for the sake of not getting into these people, needing to do it in something like the normal way. But boy, it's not going to look very normal. There's going to be 25 or 30,000 troops there, as there need to be. And how many? I have no idea how many 40-block section of the city fenced off. This is the oldest Democratic pageant in the world. It's been going on for 242 years. And it's not going to look very democratic. It's going to look like Pyongyang on Dear Leader Day, and that's really sad. But that's where we are. And I'm nervous about state capitals that day, and I'm nervous about ML King Day too, which happens to fall 2 days before.
Michael, to me, none of this is coincidental. First of all, you have January 5th, an African American and a Jew elected to a Confederate state. And I tell people, people should go back. People focus to me on the wrong thing and driving Miss Daisy. This is a black man and a Jewish woman.
Yeah.
The friendship, but if you remember, there was a cameo of Dr. King in that movie.
Yeah.
And a cameo of the bombing of a Jewish synagogue in Georgia. All right. So this was an era when that was happening. It was not safe for blacks or Jews in Georgia, right? So Georgia elects an African American and a Jew to the Senate to tip the back. You're not supposed to. You're not allowed to do that, Michael. That's not supposed to. So for them to have this type of reaction, and then for this to fall so close to Martin Luther King's birth, and then not just any African American, a successor to the King family in the very pulpit the family served in. So, that's some very powerful imagery, symbolism, and tangible reality. And so I think you have a good reason to be worried about Martin Luther King Day and the desecration of what that day is supposed to mean. I think that we all have to be concerned. But looking down the road, is this fixable, Michael? I mean, has Trump done irreparable harm? What we thought we had in Obama, and I know it wasn't perfect. There were moments of unity, moments of healing and coming together with the election of an African American. Now it seems like we've gone back to an era even before Obama was elected, maybe even before Jimmy Carter was elected. Can Joe Biden heal that? Is that possible?
No, but he can improve it, right? He can improve it. We're not going to have a maniac in the White House who's constantly dividing people, constantly calling names, constantly committing impeachable offenses and all the rest of it. We're going to have a man again who is a dignified person as the President of the United States. That's going to count for something. It really will, I think. He's never going to have a 65% approval rating because that's just not in the cards in this country anymore. But I could see him having a steady, as long as the economy holds out and as long as he responds to the pandemic in the way that he promises. I could see him having a steady, 52% approval rating, which is really good for as divided as this country is, and it would be great news, and it would marginalize the radical right extremists, but they're not going away. Their presence in the Republican Party is not going to be terribly diminished. They're going to continue to win primaries in certain districts. We've got two QAnon people in the House now, Boebert of Colorado, whom I mentioned, and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. It wouldn't surprise me at all if we get two more next time, and two more the next time, and two more the next time, and so on and so on. This is not going to be easily tamped out. And, I don't know, my friend, what exactly the answers are. It's something that has to be done more by the Republican Party than by the Democratic Party, and it has to be done, I think, also by the business community. I was glad to see some of these corporations make some of the statements they made this week, but I think they have to be much more forceful. I mean, corporations depend on democracy too, and a prosperous nation. And this is just we're stuck with this for a while.
Unfortunately, we are. It was interesting hearing Joe Biden. People laugh, but I think Joe Biden said on the way I did, he was on his campaign trail. Don't you all want a president that isn't on the news every day for something crazy? I mean, and that's really the way it's supposed to be. Last thing I'll say, this goes back to something else, because I don't think we can ever forget this. So I have a theory, too, in terms of what happened Wednesday means a lot of things. But here's something else I think, and I want to try this on with you and see what you think. Remember, one of the reasons Putin was so against Hillary was because he believed that Hillary and Barack, with the help of the CIA, orchestrated the demonstration, one of the big demonstrations in Moscow after one of the sham elections that put Putin in office. This was 2011, 2012, somewhere. Yeah. Remember that? He had a fit, and he just blamed them for it. He was so mad that people were demonstrating after his election. So look at this, Michael. What has his puppet done? He has created the same visual after an election in this country that just looked just like what was in Moscow, so that he can then go back to his puppet master. Because, where's the money coming from? Now, businesses are pulling out $40-50 billion in debt, or $500 million in debt. Yeah. He can sell that. He can go to Putin and say, hey, man, but look, at least I gave you what the same thing that you believe they gave you in Moscow. You had people demonstrating in the streets saying an election was illegitimate, just like that is what happened to you. And that crossed my mind. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you didn't mention the piece of the puzzle that's also very interesting here is Deutsche Bank announcing that it's going to not do business with the Trump organization anymore. I think his brand is just going to be crushed. There are going to be Americans, sure, who are going to go to Las Vegas and make it a point to stay in Trump's hotel. There's always going to be that. There's going to be MAGA people who are going to want to do business in his hotels. But as far as like the business world, and other corporations, and banks, and Deutsche Bank, and the PGA, and the city of New York, which had contracts with him that de Blasio canceled the other day, and other cities and other governments, he's done. He's done, and I think he knows it, and I think he's looking at bankruptcy and looking at not being able to pay back that $450 million, and of course he's looking at potential prosecutions from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the New York Attorney General's Office and elsewhere. So if you're really asking me, might he be living in a dacha in Crimea in 2 years? The answer is, there's at least a 30% chance.
And look, for him, relative to him, that's not so bad. If they'll hook him up, he'll be, he'll have what they say in prison, 3 hots and a cot every day, and that's a better 3 hots and a cot that he'll have if Tish James and others, lock him and the whole family up. I don't think you woke up this morning. I was asking Michael about his daughter who's 10. I don't think Michael wakes up every morning wondering, I wonder if I should get somebody to pardon my daughter. She hadn't done anything. When you talk about pardoning people before they've even been charged, it's like that means you're admitting that they did something that is chargeable. I can't just fantasize about a crime that has not been committed. You were in the ballpark when you do that, so I think we know what that is. This has been an incredible time. Michael, we've missed you, and Michael is always on top of these things. Folks, we invite you to go to thedailybeast.com. I'm sure, like me, even after all this, we're glad he's leaving, but this has been exhausting. And even in the middle of a pandemic, dealing with him, covering him, all of us again being victim of his narcissism and his sociopathology. You want to say, oh, please, let's just kind of take a nap if we can.
Just not having to read his tweets for the last 5 days has just been a release like I've never seen.
Yeah, and it's probably driving him crazy because that's his primary means of communication. All the parlor people. Word of advice, y'all: don't go and commit a crime and then put your selfie without a mask as you're committing the crime. Does that? I like John Oliver's terminology. He calls it stupid Watergate. And my other thing too, if everybody had marched on the Capitol saying we didn't get enough support in a stimulus check, which is true, what can anybody say? Not one of those demonstrators even said, okay, we're here for this illegitimate election steal. And by the way, we also a little mad because we didn't get enough stimulus. Not one of them said that. They didn't even have sense enough to raise that as a legitimate grievance when they're inside the Capitol breaking out the windows. So, stupid Watergate, man.
They're just, they're obsessed with one thought, whatever Trump told them.
Yeah. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for joining us as always. Let's not stay so long, okay?
Anytime, man.
Long from each other, all right?
Thank you.
All right. Michael Tomasky, folks, dailybeast.com.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, subscribe, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.
Be a barbecue hero with delicious, ultra-low net carb hero bread, buns, and tortillas. Soft and fluffy, high in fiber, and with 0 grams of sugar, up to 10 grams of protein, coming in at under 100 calories per serving. Oh, and did I mention they taste like their mouth-watering traditional versions? I mean, what's not to love? Use code AH10 for 10% off your first Hero Bread purchase at hero.co. That's AH10 for 10% off at hero.co.